Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here coming to you with the last update to the Quebec provincial election. So, just before we get into what has happened in the last week and what might be happening on election day and some things to look out for, I will just start with there will not be a live stream of the election night. Because of how my day job works, Tuesdays are a very early day for me, and I can't stay up late doing a live stream as well. My co-host Lexi has school the next day, so she can't stay up late as well for that. And frankly, I have really bad French, and I think most of the real coverage that you would actually care about for that, leader speeches, stuff like that, is going to be in French, so I don't really have anything to say on that. So I won't be doing a live stream with this one. Same thing, I didn't do live stream with the debates because my French is not good enough. Maybe in the future, but not right now. But on to the main stick. What has occurred riding-wise since the last update? So Chavot has flipped back into the CAQ column, as well as some of the ridings around Quebec City, like this one and just around here, have gotten a lot safer. A couple of other ridings here, like Legault's own riding and some of like the deep ones in the middle of this CAQ band here, are now a greater than 60% margin. Not margin, sorry. The CAQ are forecast to get 60% plus of the vote in these ridings, so they're going to extremely blow them out by the modeling forecast. A couple other ridings have changed outside of Montreal. Pontiac here is now leaning towards CAQ, but the Liberals are competitive again. But the Conservatives are still in play there. They're just third place, but they're only like, I think 4 or 5 points behind the CAQ, so definitely possibility. And the last non-Montreal riding has changed is this Mattapan blah 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 blah. I can't think of the name. I don't know how to pronounce the name. Again, my French is not great. Is now even safer for the Parti Québécois. So they're likely going to walk away with this one. Bonaventure and Ile-de-Madeleine and Gaspé are long shot. In fact, actually, I think Ile-de-Madeleine right now is more likely to go Conservative by my model than it is to go Parti Québécois. We'll see how true that is. Because again, as I said before, and I'm going to say again here, a party like the Conservatives that has blasted forward in popularity hugely from around 1 to around, well, if we go here, my model has them at a bit shy of 17 and a half. It's very difficult to actually forecast them because it's very difficult to know where their strength is and where their base is. So I didn't get a lot of polls that show vote intention change. So basically, how did you vote in 2018? How are you voting now? There wasn't a lot of those polls, so it was hard to synthesize this. I have a little bit of it, which is one of the reasons why Pontiac has been bouncing around a little bit, is these past voting, like how you voted in 2018 and how you're voting now, polls. Like there was some research in the Angus Reid ones, which caused some of these to bounce around a bit. So I'm a bit more confident overall in the CAQ numbers after getting this research go on this Angus Reid poll, but it's still iffy to me. But the final one in seat changes here, there's a bunch happening in Montreal. So pretty much all 5 Laval ridings are even less safe for the CAQ, so they have even lower vote margins. They're still likely going to win all of them, except this one, but it is much narrower margins. This guy over here, and this one, and this one have all become safer for the Liberals. This guy and this guy are pickups for the Liberals that were slightly leaning CAQ but now are firmly in the Liberal column. This guy's now slightly leaning PLQ and this guy's slightly leaning CAQ, but the PLQ are competitive. And this guy here is slightly leaning CAQ, but Quebec Solidaire is competitive. Here, Camiller, I can't think of how to pronounce the riding name, but this is where I think it's this riding, it's either this one here or this one here, is where the leader of the Parti Québécois, Plamondon, is running, and the Quebec Solidaire candidate has dropped out of the race there. I currently have it going to the CAQ, but the Parti Québécois is a much more competitive race than it was before. They're only down about 9 points, and that could be different or could be slightly underestimating it because, what's the word for it? The data I'm using to compensate for the fact that the Quebec Solidaire candidate's not running in that riding is to assume the national or provincial-wide vote intention second choice is what's going to happen in this riding, but that's not necessarily true because the second choice in very urban areas like Montreal here aren't necessarily going to be the same as the second choice of, say, Parti Quebec or Quebec Solidaire voters in Boyce over here. So it is possible that I might be underestimating the vote a bit, or I could be overestimating it. We'll see, but I think there's going to be very big error bars on this one, and I'm not really going to be counting it as a super big miss if I get it wrong. I will also call it a miss if I get it wrong, but I think it'll be, if this is the only one I get wrong, I don't think that's a big deal, if that makes sense. Because having a major party drop candidates makes it very difficult to compensate, because the way my model works, it doesn't like that. I'm coming up with, I think I'm going to be handling this riding much better than I handled Kitchener Center in 2021, because techniques, methodology changes, but we'll see. And the last thing I'd like to note is this general region right here, but specifically Boyce has, north and south that is, have had a couple regional polls, some from Main Street, some from Segma, and it's very unclear to me where these will go. Segma had them extremely competitive for the Conservatives, possibly winning. I think it was Boyce North or South. I think it was South. That was slightly winning for the Conservatives, and North was neck and neck. But Main Street had much larger margins in both of them for the CAQ. And the overall polls have the CAQ with larger margins in these ridings, or not ridings, sorry, in Quebec than these regional polls suggest. So I'm confident is the wrong word. I think that this is the best way to represent these two ridings here, and I don't think my model's wrong in how they are forecasting them. But these two, and possibly some others in this region, like Bella Chase and Lévis and such, or possibly Chavot itself, are a bit of a question mark from the aforesaid difficulty with the CAQ, the Conservatives, where it's very difficult to assess their actual strength because I don't have a lot of the data to compensate for that. And even with the data I would want, it would still be very difficult to project because regional strength is very different than a lot of other things. So it's a bit difficult there, but so there's a lot of reasons why the little region over here could go wildly different. I think I'm pretty much in alignment with everybody that it's likely going to be the CAQ winning, and we'll see the margin. I'm actually pretty confident that around high 40s, low 50s is probably what's going to happen if the CAQ wins. I think this area is pretty much a two-party race. The Solidaire, Parti Québécois, Liberal are basically dead in these areas. That makes sense. Now, if we just go here and look at the popular vote changes in the last week, so the Conservatives are down about a point, others down about 0.8, primarily driven from losses in Montreal and Quebec City. Parti Québécois has gained about, what does this work out? 1.8, a large amount from Montreal, and a large amount in the rest of Quebec. The gain in Montreal, I don't think is oh, I'm actually slightly underestimating their gain in Montreal a bit. They should be slightly higher. And so, okay, just one note here. I don't want to redo the math live, but I will do this for the post-mortem. I will have corrected this. But I don't want to redo the video right now. It's late. But the CAQ, the Liberals, the Conservatives, and others should be slightly lower in Montreal because I forgot, and maybe Quebec Solidarity too, because I forgot in this number to accurately capture this riding. My map has captured it, but these numbers here, I forgot to update these. So these are slightly different, but we're talking about one riding in like 33, so it's not going to be huge. Just slightly different. But generally speaking, Parti Québécois gained a bit of ground last week. It looks like this has really been buoyed by solid debate performances and the Parti Québécois is kind of in a cutthroat battle right now with Quebec Solidaire. So they've taken some support from Quebec Solidaire, who's down about half point or 0.6. So it will be interesting to see how these two go, and especially if I'm actually right on these two, because if you've looked at Too Close to Call or 338, they have, particularly Quebec Solidaire, appreciably higher than I do. And actually the Conservatives a bit lower, and we're almost in agreement on the Liberals, I think. Actually, I can bring up 338 here, because I am of the opinion that in something like this, you should look at many sources, because I can be wrong. I'm confident, but I can be wrong. So yeah, we're roughly in agreement with the Liberals. He thinks that Quebec Solidaire and Parti Québécois are slightly higher, and I think CAQ and Conservatives are slightly higher. We'll see who is more correct there, but that is something that is in doubt. And if you're looking at this map and you're only seeing 5 seats for Quebec Solidaire, if you go here and you're looking at Quebec Solidaire 3 percentage points higher, especially with CAQ about almost 3 lower, getting closer to 10 is very possible. Like, just to call out some, if you do those changes, Sherbrooke over here is in play, Taschereau is in play, this guy's in play, this almost certainly is Quebec Solidaire, and these two are possibly in play for Quebec Solidaire, though it's marginal, but it's possible. So it is conceivable that if they gain 3 points and the CAQ lose to, and the Liberals lose about half a point, that they could do a pickup of, what was that, 6 that I just pointed out there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Yeah, 6. So going to around 11 is conceivable, if I'm wrong on it. So it's not that out there. In other words, I think the seat projection by 338 is correct if those vote shares are correct. The question is on vote shares, and we have slightly different methodologies, which is why we get different ones. I don't think 338 is wrong or bad on this. I will have friendly competition, and I will compare our respective results after the election numbers are out. But, well, I don't think there's anything strictly wrong with it. He has a slightly different model. So, now the main question you might have with all these things that have changed, why did the Liberals suddenly gain tons of strength, especially in the southeast corner of Montreal? Telling this east is dubious, but the southern corner of Montreal here, why did they gain so much strength there? Well, generally, more broadly the south, let's say. Well, we go here, I think this kind of captures a little bit, maybe not. So, okay, we won't look at that because I don't think it really captures what I'm trying to say here. At least not in a nice way. So, on a riding level, what has sort of happened, it looks like, is kind of a twofold factor. So, the first one is it looks like, based on the polling, that there's been, between the Conservatives and Liberals, some filtering going on. Voters are clearly, in general, seem to be informed on what's going on provincially. So in some areas where you have Liberal, Conservative swing voters, in areas where the Liberals look like they can win, they're edging Liberal. In areas where the Conservatives look better, are winning, they're edging Conservative. So as a result, the Conservative vote share in southern Montreal has dropped a bit. They've gained vote share in Laval and other places too, so they didn't really lose vote share in Montreal, but specifically, they have lost a bit of vote share in these areas that typically have been Liberal dominated. So that's part of it. The other big one, which you can see very clearly captured here, is the CAQ has lost 2.4 points in Montreal recently, and again, Quebec or Liberals are up about 2.7. Some of that is because of changes in how others voting, how the Conservatives are voting, as I captured there. The big one, though, is CAQ. It appears to me, from the polling, that a minor, in regards to the overall scope of the election, unforced error by, I believe it was the former now immigration minister, about the nature of immigrants. I can't remember the exact words of the statement, so I'm not going to say it because I don't remember the exact thing and I want to misquote the guy. But he said something that was inflammatory about immigrants to the media and possibly immigrants, and it looks like allophone voters. I think he said it was like, I could be wrong here, and if I am wrong, I deeply apologize. But I think it was something about, I think he said something along the lines of immigration is cultural suicide or something, or maybe that was Legault himself. One of Legault and the immigration minister, I think both, have the last week said some, to Canadian sensibilities, inflammatory things about immigration, that this would be pretty par for the course in Europe, so we'll see where, if it actually does anything. But the main thing it seems is, in Montreal, it seems to have caused a lot of the allophone voters to go back to the Liberal column. It has scared them away from the CAQ, it seems. And this is part of what has caused the Liberal resurgence. In a way, it might potentially edge the Liberal Party into persistence. I know that I've had a couple commenters. I'm really bad at this. You know what? You'll have to give me a moment. I'm just going to look this up because I am tired of forgetting every single commenter who makes good points. And let's see. Okay, so specifically going to call out, I only really had, anyways. Mad Beasteddy, my comments on the last week's video, made a good point that my assessment that the Liberal Party was potentially dying might have been a bit hyperbolic. And I will admit, on reflection, I might have been a bit too bullish on that. It looks like between these statements and this election and the leadership of the Liberal Party, they've pretty much become a regionalist party. They are the Anglophone, allophone voters pretty much in Montreal. It's pretty much their entire voting base. And this isn't just my supposition. This is really heavily backed in available polls. So if you just give me one moment. I will have the number for you. So they have, right now, the Liberals are sitting at 49% among non-Francophones, so Anglo and Allophones, and only 7% among Francophones. That is the numbers of pretty much southern Montreal. And maybe a bit more into the Montreal area or a little bit around Ottawa. They have become the party of a single group of people. And I think this is one of the reasons why, if you can look here, Other has dropped off so significantly in Montreal. Because there was a couple of splinter parties formed. The Canadian Party of Montreal or something like that. I can't remember the names of them. They're not amounting to anything interesting or significant, so I've kind of glossed over them, and I seem to not be wrong about that. But those parties are basically trying to become the Quebec version of the Bloc. Federally. And it looks like they have been outcompeted by the more established Liberal brand, and the Liberals have pretty much become the Quebec version of the Bloc. And I think it's very, very possible if the party leadership understands this, they can at minimum retain around, let's say, a plausible range of 17 to 20, 25 seats. If we want to be more broad, it might be 15 to 25 might be their plausible range under the current leadership. Under the current circumstances. They get a unicorn leader after Anglade resigns because there's no way she's staying on board after this result. Excuse me. This would be a disastrous election. I can't imagine her staying. They might, with a unicorn leader, let's say like the Quebec version of Trudeau federally, they might be able to resurrect the party, which Trudeau did to the Liberals federally. But not being super familiar with Quebec politics, I couldn't even speculate on a leader coming in like that. So I'm gonna cautiously ignore the possibility there, and just go with, I think, the more robust and more likely scenario is that they continue to have leadership that understands their core base, but doesn't really go anywhere from there. And if that is the case, then I think you'll see Montreal Liberals become the party of basically this cutout. This cutout might be the limit of the ridings they're competitive in. And again, we go back to overall popular vote here, 6% in Quebec City, and only 10% in the rest of Quebec, and that includes these ridings here, that includes these outer suburbs of Montreal, around Sherbrooke area, around Ottawa area, up here, and like where there's tons, where natives are a larger percentage of the population, and the natives tend to be less, for good reason. Francophone nationalists. In all these areas, they do quite poorly, 10%. And I think it is very, very possible, barring strong, innovative unicorn leader, the party in 2026 will pretty much be wiped off the rest of the map. Now, mind you, that said, Quebec City might be close to their bottom of the pool, because I guess the way I'm seeing it is they're not going to have 0 votes everywhere else as long as they run candidates. The issue is they might start finding it really hard to find candidates in places like voice. If the Conservatives are doing well there, it might be very hard to find candidates because a lot of those voters might be going to the Conservatives, especially if the CAQ stays a dominant force. If the CAQ kind of fades out once Legault retires or leaves politics, or I guess retires or loses an election, then maybe that'll be different. But if the CAQ persists past Legault, I don't really see much potential of the Liberals resurrecting in these rural areas unless the Conservatives burn out. And I don't really see that either. I think it was extremely anomalous that the Conservatives didn't exist as an official separate party for a while. So, where does this go going forward? Right. So, overall, barring speculation of the CAQ not being able to survive Legault, which is always the possibility of a new party, relatively new party, that I should say, I think it's very likely the Parti Québécois sort of limps past this, but is basically dead. As soon as the Pascal here retires, I think the Parti Québécois dies. Against the CAQ, I just don't really see them pulling out seats anymore. Maybe they can recover vote share, but they're down to 10, so they've lost 6 percentage points of vote share. They've lost a lot of vote share everywhere, especially in the rest of Quebec. Lost a bit less in Quebec City. So, I don't think it's very likely that they're going to go anywhere from here. I think the party might be on the verge of extinction. If it does dissolve, it's not going to... Some people speculated merging with Quebec Solidaire. I don't think it's going to happen officially. I think the party might run out of funding. Depends. They do get funding from number of votes cast in Quebec, but their donors might leave them. They might start finding it very difficult to recruit candidates, and if that does happen for them, then I see the party kind of quietly dying away. I don't think it's going to officially merge with anyone else. I think you're going to see a lot of the more left-leaning part of the party going to Quebec Solidaire, and a lot of the right-leaning part of the party, or more centrist part of the party, going to the CAQ. So if we do assume that does happen, and the Parti Québécois dies, I think you're likely going to see, kind of based off second choice right now, maybe about 50% of them going to Quebec Solidaire, and then the rest of them kind of splitting everyone else, but mostly going to the CAQ. So let's say 50% to Quebec Solidaire and 30% to CAQ, and then the other 20%, some to the Conservatives, some to the Liberals, and some just gone. They just stopped voting, pretty much. I would call the people who stop voting are like the hardcore sovereigntists who are motivated by leaving, not for any other reason, if that makes sense. They want to leave Canada. That's what they're voting for. Quebec Solidaire, I think, is going to be durable, but after this election result, I don't really think they're going anywhere. Because there has been commenters, because last week I was kind of bullish that maybe they'll encroach on the Liberals. Because I forgot, unfortunately, that Quebec Solidaire is a sovereigntist party. Oops. See, I'm not perfect. So I don't really see Quebec Solidaire going anywhere. I don't actually see it going away. But I don't really see it going anywhere. I think they've pretty much... Their range is, I think, 5 to 10. Maybe 5 to 15 if we're being extremely ambitious. If they gain the 5-ish% from Parti Québécois, 5 to 15 seems possible, but I don't really see them ever going anywhere. They're not gonna. They're kind of like the Quebec version of the NDP. Shocking, right? I don't really see them ever amounting to anything meaningful because they're too left wing for people. If Quebec adopted some flavor of proportional system, I could see them being in a coalition government. But under any version of majoritarian elections, any type of single constituent winner election system, I don't see them doing that because it would be too dangerous or damaging for anyone else to coalition with them. They might be de facto balance of power, but official coalition, the thing would just be too damaging for the other party involved. And then that leaves us with the Liberals and the Conservatives. Now, there's two possibilities here. Maybe really two and a half. So the first one is the Conservatives kind of flame out and the Liberals kind of limp back together with a new leader who has a better vision of what the party should be. That's possible, but I'm pretty skeptical. I think the Liberals, after reflection on what, again, Mad Beast was suggesting, I think it's very likely that they'll limp on, the Liberals, lick their wounds a bit, regain. Again, not likely. I think by themselves, again, 15, 25 seats probably. What I think is probably the best option at this point for the Conservatives and Liberals, because they're both Federalist parties, if they want to stop the CAQ, would be to form an official electoral coalition. This would be wildly novel in Canada, but there are places, such as Germany, where you have major parties that do exactly this. In Germany, the main centrist, center-righty party, the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, has a regional permanent alliance with the Bavarian Christian Social Union, which makes it sound more lefty, but I believe it's actually more righty than the CDU. The way it works is the CDU doesn't run any candidates in Bavaria, and the CSU only runs candidates in Bavaria, and they form a permanent coalition. A similar example is in Hungary with the KDNP and Fidesz being Orban's party. They also have a similar workup. I don't know exactly which seats they broke up, but they have a similar idea. And again, Italy, the right-wing and the left-wing coalitions have similar ideas where they have certain areas and certain seats that certain parties in the coalition run uncontested from their allies in the coalition. I could see something like that working in Quebec. You have, let's say, the traditionally liberal areas like Montreal, Laval, and maybe some of the surrounding suburbs. The Liberals only run candidates and the Conservatives don't run candidates. And in a lot of the rural, more conservative areas, the Liberals don't run anybody and the Conservatives only run somebody. And if you did this optimally, what I could see happening under optimal scenarios, you might boost the Liberals from 15 to 25 to 20 to 30 range, and the Conservatives right now, under my current forecasting, might go from 0 to 15 range to maybe like 5 to 40. They have a much larger range because they're more competitive and more ridings, but they have a much lower floor because the CAQ is also very competitive in all those ridings. The reason for this is you would lose, for example, Quebec City, you probably have almost zero Liberal candidates running Quebec City, and if you did this optimally, you'd probably get 75-80% of these Quebec City Liberal voters going to the Conservatives, which on their first pass the post would increase vote efficiency quite significantly, and you'd see similar circumstance in, generally speaking, like this whole region over here. You probably see Robertville and possibly Ungava flip to the Conservatives, though I could also see the argument that Ungava should be one of the Liberal ones. But regardless, some official electoral alliance could be the way forward, which would be kind of what the Liberal Party was previously, but I don't think the Conservatives in Quebec want that anymore, because what you end up seeing, you saw under Philip Couchet, Jean Charest, is you couldn't have a prime minister or a premier that was very conservative. He had to be very centrist, and you couldn't really have any MPs in his caucus pushing conservative things because it would damage the centrist part of the branch. If you had an official electoral alliance, it would give freedom for the Liberal MPs to be more centrist or whatever they want to be, and it would give more freedom to Conservative MPs to be more conservative, and it would, depending on how these two parties go, they can make the agreement that whichever one got more seats in the event of a win, that party's leader became the premier. It would give the leaders of the parties more freedom to actually have strong choices. I could see this being an effective strategy, specifically in Quebec, because I suspect, regardless of its form, some form of sovereigntist or soft nationalist party will be dominant in Quebec as long as Quebec is majority French. The day that Quebec's French is annihilated to the tears of people like Legault and the chagrin of centuries of Quebecers, that might go away. But until that day happens, the French vote is always going to go super, super heavily towards some form of sovereigntist or nationalist party. And as a result, because of this particular underlying strain here, you're always going to have... You can't have normal electoral politics, regardless of the voting system. Right? This is the important thing. This transcends voting systems. This is a bit of political fiction, and it is dumb, but if we assumed this was proportional, you would have just shy of 73% of the... Wait, is that 73%? Sorry, 63% of the vote going to... Sorry, just shy of 64% of the vote going to separatist, sovereigntist, or soft nationalist, primarily francophone parties. And then you would have the better part of 36% going to federalist parties. And yes, some people in the sovereigntist, separatist faction are willing to vote federalist, but that's the clincher here. It's some people who are okay with sovereignty or nationalism might vote federalist. Not the other way around. That 30-ish 5% is pretty much the floor for federalist opposition. It probably can't meaningfully go much lower than that. So in a proportional system, yes, you'd have better representation of parties, but the end result of this election would be very similar. It might require Legault to coalition with the Parti Québécois, might require coalitions with Quebec Solidaire, or possibly, depending on Legault's exact agenda, maybe someone else, which you could argue would probably make, in this particular context, might make Quebec's government better or more fair. But the core thing here is the underlying reality in Quebec is you have one question that dominates the politics, which break normal electoral norms. This isn't a province where, broadly speaking, left versus right matters. It's almost entirely federalist versus sovereigntist. Even in this election, it's basically that. The problem is, because the Liberal brand is so badly managed by people like Anglade and other leadership of the Liberal Party doing clowny things like the backing Bill 21. Was it Bill 21? No, the language law. Bill 96. I think it was Bill 96. Backing that and proposing amendments to make it more strenuous or more strict. It hurt the brand and it hurt the position of the party. And people like Legault, for various reasons, are extremely popular with francophones right now because he's perceived as doing things. Are these things actually effective? It's probably too early to tell, to be frank, but history will rule on this. So, the traditional math that makes sense that you talk about in any other province doesn't make sense here. It will probably be almost... I don't think anyone who will ever watch this video will see a day where Quebec's politics isn't about some flavor of sovereigntist versus federalist. The only reason that might change is if Quebec leaves. As long as it's part of Canada, and as long as it's majority francophone, especially overwhelmingly francophone as it currently is, that will never change. Because the anxiety of, let's be honest, a effectively different culture possibly seeing its doom drive politics. But I think the rest of us in the rest of Canada, there is a lesson to be learned here, because I think a lot of the anxieties that are currently only seen in Canada among francophones are likely going to start bubbling to the surface in the rest of Canada for the exact same reasons. In Quebec, it's because they are scared that French in the Quebec culture is being erased originally by Anglophones from the rest of Canada, but now immigrants coming in who don't assimilate to Quebec French, they assimilate to Anglo-Canadian, and actually increasingly aren't even super assimilating because they're coming in too high of numbers for our society to integrate them, or at least that is the argument the French people are making. Like Legault, they're coming in too large of a number to be integrated. A lot of these concerns are happening everywhere else. The catch is, in the rest of Canada, you will be openly attacked by the media and called a racist for even saying those things. To even venture that our immigration numbers might be too high makes you racist. Now, you get attacked in the French media in Quebec for being against immigration. Legault and his immigration minister recently got a lot of flack, as I said earlier. But not to the same level. If, let's say, the next premier of Alberta, after the leadership race, said, "Oh, we have too many immigrants. They are replacing or destroying the local culture because we can't integrate them. It's too many. We can't handle the volume of people." they would be openly called racist. And that would be the news cycle for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it might possibly sink the party. Hard to say. But it would be very damaging. It's only very recently in Europe where being concerned about the level of immigration is becoming so deep that you can cut through the media in this regard. But even then, at least in Anglo countries, you'll see people like parties like the Swedish Democrats or the Brothers of Italy bad-mouthed and called fascist, post-fascist, far right. When, if you look at them quite objectively, they have nothing to do with fascism and their policies they're advocating. They're called these things because they want to restrict immigration primarily. Why is that? I don't know. Quebec manages to avoid this because the rest of Canada doesn't want to jump on it because they don't want to alienate Quebec. The rest of Canada is terrified of Quebec leaving for various reasons, which gives a lot of cushion to this regard. Literally no other premier could get away with things Legault has done about the immigration profile. They would probably be removed by their own backbenchers. Oh god. I just swallowed wrong. Wow, shows me to drink while speaking. Okay, so I'm back from that. Sorry, that was a minor cut there because that sucked. So just to finish up here, wow, if I had the effort to edit at 1:30 in the morning, I would probably edit that out. I lost my train of thought. So just to finish up here, it's likely that we're actually looking at the new status quo in Quebec. If, depending on exactly how the Liberals and the Conservatives handle this new status quo, we might see 2026 become competitive. It will also have the benefit of 8 years of Legault. Will people be more exhausted, more willing to look for someone else? The question is, though, if the Conservatives and Liberals still try to compete with each other and the CAQ, I don't think you'll see the CAQ lose. I think you'll see maybe they'll have less seats than they currently do, but they're bound to win if the opposition is divided by 3 or 4 ways. But with that, I mean, if you liked the video up until the point where I was choking, by all means, like, share, and subscribe. Comment below what you think, if you think my analysis is on point, if it's stupid, if I'm dumb, or if you think I've missed something, or you think there might be an error somewhere in the map, or if you just have any insight on the election or anything you want to say. They're all really good comments, and I really like when I get a bunch of them, like the video I had on Thursday. I had the federal election, I got like 40 people comment. That was great. Love that stuff. I can't reply to everyone when you start getting that many comments. I just don't have enough time in my day to keep going through everything and come up with like logical and thoughtful replies. But by all means, I will always be replying to at least the first several dozen, the first many commenters. First couple hours of commenters. As long as I have something intelligent to say, I'll definitely be replying. And I always love them to read them, and I've always read every comment so far. So, those my way. Always love them. If you want to stay up to date with this kind of stuff, subscribe to the channel so you can keep this going, and make sure you share it to your friends to spread the word, and so this can get more traffic. Really helps the channel, and I really appreciate it. So, with that, I will bid you adieu. And I will see you Tuesday with something. I haven't decided which, but I do have 2 different videos planned this week, so we'll see which one makes more sense to do Tuesday. With that, have a great day.